world's writers will walk through those gates. And if you hang around, you get a chance to talk to them.
I'm interested in conversations that deal with things that matter, that real, how do we live our lives?
First of all, make climate change personal in your life. The second step is get angry and get active. And the third step, and believe it or not, I think this is the most important. We have to imagine this world that we want to hurry towards.
It's about kindness is looking at people as people and not as I voted this, I do this, whatever it is. There are some people we will never get along with, but most of us are a complex mass of different things.
I hope you enjoy your events in this year's digital programme and that they spark in you thoughts and conversations and feelings. All the things that a good book should do and all the things that a wonderful book festival like Edinburgh International Book Festival does too. It's a book festival that's really dear to my heart. It's one of the first festivals I attended as a new author. I was part of their Outriders Africa programme, and every year returning to it feels a little bit like coming back to a literary home. It's such a pleasure to see them going online this year, and I'm so excited for the future of Edinburgh International Book Festival.
The Sportsman by M. Nilika Jayavardhana. On the night train to Mombasa, she slept on the top bunk because he was afraid of falling. Inside their cramped quarters, she shaved her armpits to stave off the reek. She didn't want him seeing her with bottle-bottom spectacles, so she kept her contact lenses in, their plastic gripping her corneas and gritty from city dust and Nairobi's winter dryness. There was a toilet that emptied onto the tracks below as the train sped through the bush between Nairobi and the coast. She didn't want to take her toothbrush into the shared toilet, and didn't want Julian to see her with rivulets of toothpaste and spit all over her mouth. So she saved brushing her teeth for the cabin sink when Julian went to take a shit. She climbed onto the bunk, getting a leg up from the metal sink near the cabin window. These are the surreptitious rituals one engages in when indulging in a fling with a man with whom one merely wants to have some sex, in between seeing one's parents and returning to the business of pleasing one's parents by getting a degree in America. When she woke up, he was still asleep. She clambered down and got new knickers out, white cotton ones. The sweat she anticipated on the coast, only a few hours away, made her chuck out any desire to look Nairobi fuckable in yellow silk. She flip-flopped her way to the toilet, armed with a sodden pile of toilet paper with which to wipe herself. The water would already be out in the toilet sink by this time of the morning, so she had to use her supply of bottled water. Already there was a queue of men waiting to piss. All of them were damp with the night's sweat. She caught the whiff of unwashed sex through pajamas. The train moved along, making little heaves and jumps. The men shifted a little with every movement of the car, the choreography of their dance determined by gaps in the railroad ties. She waited her turn for the toilet, lurching along with this grimy chorus line. The pile of tissue in her hands dripped between her legs. A gap in the floorboards showed a blur of rail ties speeding by. After she had her turn in the toilet, she went to the observation area in the back of the train, held onto the railing, and thought about how the ambition that drove her to get to the next thing, then the next, meant she couldn't stay with any one thing. Maybe she searched out things not worth staying with, just so that she'd have to leave. They'd get to the coast by 1 PM. It was barely 7:30 in the morning, but she could feel the heat rising. The sun was high already. The light seeping through the drawn curtains was dry, plains bright. It reminded her of eastern Montana's wheat farm country, where the vast flapjack flat expanses betrayed not even a hint of the Rocky Mountains rising in the west. But here the light was a whiteout that no Northern American plainsman could imagine. This was the light stored away in her memory, sustaining her through the gray days of American winters. Some of her childhood friends from the Rift Valley Lakes region had a pocket of fat skin along the lower eyelid that drew up the lower rim of the eye to the iris when they blinked or laughed, shading the eye from the sun. When they smiled, their eyes joined in, the lower lip of the eye moving in unison with the curving mouth. Even now, when she saw a random international student at her university, a Kenyan, a northern Zambian with those smiling eyes, she felt something like homesickness, but also a desire to move to the other side of the room. That longing was something she'd fought hard to leave behind. She got back to the cabin to dress. Julian slept on, snoring a little. Awake, his dark brown hair was tailored for his contours, and his eyes shrieked blue above the peeling brown of his cheekbones. He had a tan only seen on white men in Africa, spreading as sly and smooth as their intentions. Such a man was never so beautiful in England.
Hello, and welcome to the Edinburgh International Book Festival. Today's podcast will focus on the Book Festival's Outriders Africa project, a discussion between two of the writers who took part and two of the women they met on their journey together. Wanjiru Koinange, author of The Havoc of Choice and founder of Nairobi's Libraries Initiative, Book Bunk, and Donna Obaseki-Ogunnaike, an energy law expert, poet, writer, and theatre practitioner, previously dubbed the Queen of Spoken Word Poetry in Nigeria. They will be joined by myself, Efua Oyofo, a writer, storyteller, and cultural custodian, and Renee Akitelek Mboya, a writer, curator, and filmmaker. Outriders Africa saw 10 writers embarking on international journeys across the continent of Africa, meeting writers and communities along their way, and engaging in discussions around migration, colonial legacies, inequalities, and the impact of globalization and environmental change. Each of the 10 outriders are to create a new work in response to their journey, which will be published in an anthology by Cassava Republic and launched at the Edinburgh International Book Festival in 2021. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Hey, Efua.
Hi, Wanjiru.
Hello, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hi, Wanjiru. Hi, Renee.
Hi. Thank you, Efua, for that wonderful introduction. That was hectic. It's nice to see everybody again after many months after the traveling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to see your faces. It feels like it was such another world when we were all
time. Yeah.
gathered. Different time completely.
Crazy.
have you guys been keeping though in this moment?
Beautifully. I think COVID has been a bit of a learning curve for everybody. I think it's safe to say, and we've all learned a lot about ourselves, and just I think about resilience and how to adapt, which is interesting actually with this conversation that we're having. Which in some ways, I think those two themes are things we're going to explore during this podcast. The first being themes of exploration and themes of resilience, especially as women. Donna, how are you doing?
I'm fine. I was listening. I was just thinking about what you just said and about how I've learned how to treat fear differently with COVID-19. I have a new way of approaching fear. And I think that the time that we all have had to both panic and build the resilient bone, I think that it's a beautiful reset button, even in spite of the losses. But I'm fine. The journey was fantastic. I got to meet Wanjiru. That was yay! that was amazing. We'd done a few weeks of just voice notes back and forth, and I was trying to imagine what she would look like. You know, the vibes on the voice notes were great, and it was such a huge relief for me coming from where I felt very vulnerable going on the journey in the first place. I was terrified at whether or not we'll be able to work in the same space, if we would have arguments, because if they say, do you view Africa the same way from an artist's perspective? I expected us to be having arguments about whether there is a black dot on the sun or if there's a safe landing space in Mars, you know. I don't know, just as artists, just crazy things, you know. Yeah. But it was fantastic, and yeah, I really, really had a good time on the journey. What was it like for you, Wanjiru?
Yeah. I definitely had the same anxieties around spending all of these days with the same person. I travel for the most part by myself. Sometimes deliberately, sometimes not, but the vibe on the voice notes was definitely right. So it definitely helped. And we're also a practice in resilience because we tried everything. We kept trying to actually call. I'm like, let's try WhatsApp. Let's try Zoom. And nothing worked. Seemed to be working. Yeah. And we're like, you know what? Voice notes are going to be the thing. And I think our voice notes back and forth can be like a very interesting behind the scenes. Trying to figure out spaces ahead of time in the way that I'm wired to do out of the traveling that I've done, where you can go on TripAdvisor and get reviews, but we kind of had to shapeshift for the continent in a way that was really, really interesting. And in a large way, I feel prepared me for this moment because my goodness, haven't we been shapeshifting and trying to adjust and all that? So it's like the journey knew.
Yeah, we had so many. Do you remember the flight connections? Those issues with how many continents, how many countries are we going to fly through just to get to the one we're going to, and the hours at the airport, and it was crazy. It was crazy, but yeah, it was fun.
So in that respect, I mean, it's so, first of all, it's so nostalgic to hear about days when people could travel. My heart breaks a little bit for the loss of transit. So it doesn't seem so bad now to have to sit in the airport for a couple of hours. But I wonder, because we are all from relatively big cities, right? Nairobi and Lagos, inside of the mythology of Africa, already have huge personalities, right? And we are almost like the citizens of these megacities. We're almost caricatures of what it is to be African, right? When you watch movies that have African characters, it's always some guy speaking Swahili or some loud Lagosian. I said Lagosian specifically because I know Nigeria is not a monolith. So I wonder, in that respect, what assumptions and what expectations you both individually and collectively had for these new African cities that you were encountering, especially starting with the Gambia, which is the smallest country in Africa. What are the assumptions that you brought to the table? How much of yourself do you think intervened in the process of traveling or traversing these landscapes, do you reckon?
You want to go, Wanjiru?
No, I'll let you go first.
Okay. Okay. So for me, I'd been to the Gambia before in 2009. And I think that I was expecting it to have changed massively development-wise. And to get there and find that at least on the outskirts of the city, it was pretty much the same. Some streets still had shells. Did you remember that? On the road instead of car.
Yes.
And I think that even though I've been there before, and I have to say this, it still did not buffer the impact of the sex exploitation, the tourism, the sex tourism in the Gambia. That hit me on so many levels. And it's crazy because I was an adult when I went, but for some reason I saw it differently now. But the people, oh my God, the people are so lovely. The Gambians are so respectful, so helpful, so honest. I'm coming from Nigeria, you know, it was crazy how honest they were. Wanjiru, you remember?
I remember, and we never had to lock like our apartment when we were leaving. In fact, it would be odd when you're like, why are we carrying around this key? Let's just leave the apartment open. But the thing about the sex tourism you mentioned resonates because I think it took us maybe like 2 or 3 days to settle into just like, it was all you could see in the beginning. And I know that I was very deliberate to not want to kind of acknowledge it because it's all that if you Google the Gambia, it's all you're going to read about. And I didn't want this trip to be about that. But I guess back to some of the assumptions that we were making and that was one of them, that I would be able to be in Gambia and not see the sex tourism because it's one thing to not want to report it, but another thing to ignore it completely because it is so kind of woven into the context of everything that you can't talk about online dating without talking about what the end goal is, which often is tied to like some kind of like better livelihood that you're using, romance or companionship to arrive at. So I think that was kind of like one of the assumptions that I've made. But I think the decision to go to Gambia also came from the fact, because I think we were both sure that we're going to Senegal, Donna and I from the beginning. And the Gambia for me was very a curious space because it's this little English-speaking strip of land completely surrounded by Senegal that from what I read before I got there, and I still believe it's fighting for kind of its independence in the region because it's surrounded by Francophone Africa for the most part. And that was interesting to see. And I don't know what I was looking for, but I just wanted to see what that looked like on the ground. It's a small, charming country, and the people. I think they should change the reason they're called the Smiling Coast to be about the people and not the fact that it's an actual smiling coast. Because I've never experienced such warmth.
I agree. And for me, I think one of the expectations I had, you know, it's crazy. You know, it's a largely Muslim country, but there's so much going on the sex tourism. And I sort of expected that because the sex tourism is so large scale there, I would find more women who are open, willing to discuss sensuality and dating and all of that. And I still met with, you know, the silence, the conservative women, but mostly feminists. I love that. Mostly feminists, like I really, really love that. But yeah, it was strange. It was strange to see that. It feels like you're in one part of the country, and you know everything is open, and then a curtain just opens, and everybody is conservative in there.
I wonder actually if you guys could tell us a little bit more about your individual research interests, because Donna, you've just brought up some aspects of your own research. Maybe tell us what exactly you were looking for that solicited this kind of surprise.
That's a good question.
Go ahead.
So I've recently been questioning the way that we have been Let me start again. I've been questioning where we get our cues about romance and companionship as modern African residents of this beautiful continent. So I am a single, warm-blooded woman living in Nairobi who has dated in Nairobi and elsewhere. I date for sport. I date because it's a muscle that you must flex like all the others, and also because companionship is a thing that I am seeking out. But what bores me about the way that it's expected to be done is that there's been no evolution. In a city like Nairobi, where like everything changes so quickly, this particular thing and only this thing, it feels like, hasn't evolved at all. So I have been questioning that a lot in this kind of moment or season in my life, and this project gave me a really good opportunity to travel and see if the same is true in other countries. How are people learning how to love? Are they using online dating? Is it a thing? If they are they using it with success? Are they trying to find people to have casual relationships with? Are they finding husbands or second husbands or wives? Or what is the scene like? So the research was about having these conversations with people that I'd meet from either the DM or from the Tinder streets, Bumble streets, and similar, depending on what country I was in. And just to have conversations about if how we're loving is evolving at all.
Yeah, and for me, and that's why I think Wanjiru and I was such a perfect fit, for this journey, because my journey, my quest was also about love, but from a different perspective. I wanted to understand what it meant to be authentically African, female, and sensual. And that became an important question for me. Growing up in Nigeria, we're very conservative to a large extent. It's changing now, but when I was growing up, you were told if you let a boy touch you, you would get pregnant. Simple as that. Like a little boy's palms just touch you, you would get pregnant. And a lot of people and a lot of women were trained or prepared to go to their husband's house. It seemed like that was your life's, goal. You just sweep the house, wash the clothes, and you're like, so what's the guy doing in all of that? But along the way, I did meet some women who walk in circles, who, and you'll understand that a bit later, who were very confident in their sensuality, in taking ownership of their own bodies, not in a performative way for their husbands, not in preparation for anything outside of themselves. And I guess in taking ownership of their bodies and understanding their own sensuality and wielding that power, when a man comes into that space or when their lover comes into that space, they are there to please her. And in pleasing her, she could then please you. So I wanted to see if there were women like that across Africa who were trained to take ownership of their bodies. And yeah, what a journey.
So, if I may ask, because that's a great point, what do you feel like the research yielded in terms of that particular question? Did you find women who were happy to take ownership of their bodies and their sexual journey? And then for you, Wanjiru, did you find what sorts of couples and couplings, because those two things are quite different, what sorts of couplings and couples did you find along your journey?
I met with I realized that the culture of silence is prevalent in across African countries. In the Gambia, the women I met, intelligent, brilliant women who are just career-driven, great minds, but hadn't really considered what it meant to take ownership of their bodies. They didn't have that, but they all expressed that they would like to know what that is. But then I also met people in Senegal, two women in Senegal, two elderly women in Senegal, and one of them, as conservative as she was, she took charge of her business. You know, she would talk about the churai, which is the incense. She would talk about the bejo, the fact that you communicate your love language through this cloth, and you can tell, you as a woman dictate to your partner how you want to be. I was going to say handled, but that's.
That's beautiful.
How you want to be romanced. You know, and
yes, with a different
bejo cloth every day, every day it has its own, and the holes. A bejo is a cloth, a traditional cloth that is perforated. It has eyelets in it, designed. Sometimes it has beads, and each one of them, and then they come in different colors, and each color means a different type of lovemaking experience that the woman wants. And she wears that, and she wears the beads on top of it. And so everything is just musical. You know, she's walking, the beads are making noise, and it's just telling the guy, get ready. You know, it depends on where the holes in the cloth is. You know, this conversation, you know.
I'm loving it. It's fantastic. You know, and the subject matter is so rich.
Yeah, you know which way she wants to be taken and all of that. And then I met another elderly woman, also in Senegal, who is completely liberal. Oh, she was a breath of fresh air. She had absolute... Wanjiru, remember that afternoon?
She spoke to my spirit, like, for real, my forever sensei.
She had absolute ownership of her body. She took charge of how she chose to use her body. She termed herself a free woman, and her ideologies or her philosophies about love is similar to polyamorous relationships. Without the name, she doesn't care for labels, you know. And she also had the bejo, she also had the incense, but just used them differently. And then I met some women in the village, 4 generations of women, mothers, great grandmother, grandmother, mother, and baby, and all of them were talking about the oral traditions being handed down to them about preparing your body, sexual performances, fragrances, the role of fragrances, the sanctity of the bedroom, communicating through cloth and bed sheets. You know, and it was, and these women are in the village. Like, we were passing by goats and grass and, you know, huts to get to these women, but they had absolute control of that. So that was interesting for me to see that underneath the shroud of silence, there's a loud voice that women speak with, but usually they communicate one to the other. What is required? Wanjiru, your experience was... It was same but different. Yeah.
I got my mind blown away. I learned that people are definitely using the internet to find each other and to hook up, but they're not necessarily using the apps the way that I imagine they would be. In Gambia, we learned that some people will just spend the afternoon on Facebook and look for, say, Sarah Jessica, because the goal is to find somebody to get you out of the country. You're looking for your Sarah Jessicas and your John Smiths, and you're like messaging them, hey, hi, and you just do that all afternoon and hope that someone's gonna respond, and then a connection forms and you take it from there. People are doing this on LinkedIn as well, in Banjul, Gambia. And these are all people being like, yeah, some guy will tell you I have a potential internship, you want to have coffee, and then it ends up being a kind of date. But they are using the online space for dating, and I think it's just because of so many economic issues. In Gambia, for instance, it's free to be on Facebook, so why would I be on Tinder if I could do the same, have the same results on Facebook? I learned a lot of things about what people are striving for. So as I mentioned, the goal is still very much the traditional union, where I want to have some kind of marriage, be it Muslim or traditional or Christian or whatever, but there will be some kind of formal union at the end of this exercise online. But like Donna said, there were still so many beautiful outliers. Auntie Fatima, as we mentioned, will just be my complete sensate, just the whole thing for whatever you are doing, be it online or in person. I can just kind of coming from a place of yourself first, and then serving that on to other people. And of course, like, I know more about online dating on the continent, well, West Africa specifically, which is where I did most of it, and Botswana. But just all of the nuances. A week is not enough for me specifically to kind of find someone on Tinder, make sure they're not like a serial killer, and then connect with them. And all of these hacks.
Simple things. Simple things.
Like, just trying to stay alive in these streets, man. You need a bit like 10 to 14 days, and we didn't have that. But Puppies in Senegal gave me like the best advice. He's like, girl, upgrade your Tinder to premium. That way you can swipe in Lagos while you sit in Nairobi. And by the time you're landing in Lagos, the ground is already fairly watered, and you know who the cycles are who are. And that is advice that I carried with me from Dakar to Lagos, and it served me really, really well. So thank you for that tidbit. Along with all of the things about like the safety and I almost got catfished in Dakar with some guy who called himself, we'll call him Mr. Catfish for the purposes of this podcast. Yeah, but people will tell you they're from NYU and they have all of these degrees and are in town on a business meeting, and then just not be who they say that they are. But it definitely was worth the research, I must say.
Yeah, and speaking about...
That just sounds like dating.
Right?
But I wonder, because you guys have brought up a lot about the nuances, and Donna, you were talking earlier about the different articulations of femininity and sensuality. I wonder, and maybe Efua, you can chime in on this because you have a similar kind of duolingual, bilingual, without actually ever being about language, like similar bilingual experience. Do you think that Francophone West Africa and Anglophone West Africa are nuanced in different ways? Because I find, and not speaking necessarily only about West Africa, I find like in Kenya and in Rwanda, where Donna ended up, we do a lot of sex. We don't speak about it necessarily. Like, there's never going to be a detailed discussion about the technicalities of the encounter. It just happens. Whereas here, there are rituals and performances, and there's a drama. There's a little bit of a melodrama before the act that is as important as the act itself.
Yeah, so I know definitely, I think when it comes to sexuality, sensuality, I think across, I would say most of West Africa, but you're right that there's some places that are a bit more open than others, but there is a ritual always around everything to do with womanity, especially when it comes to sex. Part of it, as Donna alluded to before, part of it is that sort of fixation on the preparation of the woman for entering this state of marriage, which unfortunately can come across a bit servile in the ways, in a very reductive manner in the way that we've done it. What I did enjoy and appreciate, even when I went to Senegal and certain other Anglophone versus Francophone West African countries, is there is some there's almost more freedom, I'd say, when you've passed the test, if that makes sense. So most of the time people will be quite reserved, but eventually they will open up to you once they feel like you are worthy of receiving the knowledge that you're requesting.
Speaking about worthiness, we had 2 experiences in Senegal. And just shout out to Papis and Shiko. And Shiko,
yes.
Papis's mother, fantastic woman. She took us to this market. She was such an open book, and I just wanted to swim and live in the steams of her incense in her house. It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. But she then took us to the market to meet some other women who are older, a bit more conservative, and they wouldn't share the knowledge because I wasn't married. Do you remember? They asked us, "Are you all married?" And we said no, and then they looked at me and said, "Aren't you married?" And I said, "Oh, I'm widowed." And they were like, "Oh, do you, like they wanted to say, but do you have a boyfriend? Like, let's just give us something to work with." You know, so that
like, please earn this information. Exactly. You have to earn it.
That happened. That happened in Senegal. And then when we went into the village initially, when Auntie Fatima took us to the women before they relaxed totally. The matriarch of the family, the great grandmom, she was like, "Are they married?" And we're there like, listen, some of us swing on the chandeliers in our minds, but we do.
We do.
you know? So
I feel like that's a really high price to pay for information, you guys.
Be married. Produce your husband, please.
I swear. But I wanted to talk about Papisa's mother and how she just talking about the liberties. So I'm looking at Papisa's mother, I'm looking at Auntie Fatime, and I'm looking at how one woman is conservative. She followed the patterns of traditions and all of that and wanted to be married. One woman is a free woman, but both of them, the language in that space of owning themselves was the same. You remember when Papisa's mother was like, "Put on the lights. Why is the light off when tell him what you want.
Yeah.
Tell him what you want. Take it." You know? And then she would say things like, "You own the home. Run it the way you want to run it, and just take charge. You know, if a man loves you, he will follow." And I couldn't believe how a woman, because she's a grandmother many times over, and she was in charge. She was absolutely in charge of that home, that space, and she walked in circles.
She walked in circles for sure,
you know? So yeah, I just wanted to mention that, and it was mind blowing how these two women of the same age range had different ideologies of how to relate and how to take ownership of their bodies, but each of them took absolute charge of themselves. That was amazing.
Yeah. Do you guys want to read something from your journeys, a little bit from your journeys for us, and then maybe we can talk about Kigali and Botswana.
Oh, there's a lot to say about those two.
Okay. Wanjiru, do you want to go first?
I can. Let me just pull up. Okay. I might need to stand for this because I'm just...
Ooh,
the full performance.
We're ready.
The full performance. Even if I am in my sweat in a cold Nairobi, I want to act like this is a keynote. So this is a piece that is early on. It's about our first night in Gambia. Essentially our first night on this journey, actually. That night, we spent time excitedly chatting about our travels and our cities and the people we have left back at home in order for us to take this journey together. It was clear earlier on in our research that Donna's and I's interests for the project would sit very well alongside each other. Donna is exploring authentic African femininity and is interested in learning the ways in which women are prepared for their bodies and all the wonderful things these bodies will do as women evolve into lovers, wives, mothers. Donna's passion for this topic is infectious. And it is during our first conversation that night in our apartment in Palmarima that Donna teaches me how to walk in circles. On the physical plane, walking in circles is almost as easy as it sounds. And if you're picturing a cat chasing its tail, then no, that's not it. To walk in circles, you must take slow, gentle steps, drawing circles with your hips. It's a movement that is seductive in its subtlety and is almost only visible to the discerning eye. The first step draws one half of the circle and the other one completes it. Repeat, slowly. And it's not just in the hips. When you're doing it right, your whole body, even your eyelashes, are involved. I sit and I watch Donna walking in circles like she's been doing it since she was a teenager. She reminds me a lot of the women in Kenya's coast. They definitely walk in circles. I, on the other hand, was a Girl Scout in primary school, And we were taught to walk with a purpose. And I realize now how much of that instruction has stuck as I attempt to walk in circles. Donna and I giggle like old girlfriends as we guide, read, contort my hips into circles. But on a deeper level, walking in circles is a state of mind. I feel powerful when I eventually learn how to do it. Like I am harnessing my feminine energy and reminding myself and the world that I will walk through this world at my pace. Because if you try to walk in circles quickly, you will fall and with little grace. And this would become clearer to me later in my journey. The end.
Ooh.
Yay, thank you.
Congratulations. That was great.
Oh, delicious.
There is a word in Wolof. There's like a specific word in Wolof for the type of woman who does this successfully.
Hey.
She's called a jongoma. Yeah, like there's a category.
Hey,
and like
jongoma.
only some people achieve jongoma level.
I love it, jongoma.
I've written it down.
I'll send you guys. I'll send you guys a reference just now.
Thank you. Thank you. So my excerpt is. Oh, I felt it, Wanjiru. I felt it. I love it. My excerpt is. There's a conversation. So we had many conversations with fantastic women, in the countries we visited. But there was one that struck me. The young women in the Gambia, they were anti-culture in terms of the performance of it, which I understand, and the traditions that required virginity and the ceremony of the white cloth, the laban. And then we met one woman, Mariama, who spoke about it so beautifully that while she was speaking, I was writing a poem. And she talked about a ceremony, the preparation for the wedding. And that preparation is called Erda. So I'm just going to read an excerpt from it about the morning of Erda. Step into the water. It's perfume for your soul. On the morning of Erda, the ceremonial bridal ritual of the Wolof, water is infused with perfumed flowers, sometimes with rice or 7 leaves from the mango tree. Red and white kola nuts are placed in the water because married life requires a balance. The calabash is placed in the bathroom of a clean room, prepared specially for this cleansing. You, the would-be bride, are led by 2 elderly women. These aunties are selected because they stayed in their marriages. You may even bear the name of one of them if she stayed married. One on either side, they lead you into the bathroom. You are sat on a mortar placed in front of the perfumed waters. Smaller calabashes in hand, each auntie pours water on you. On the left and on the right, 3 times. Wait, don't rise yet. They will, in unison, pour the rest of the perfumed water on your head, because a new journey commences today. You now rise and turn around, backing the calabash. Remember to push the calabash back with your right foot. You mustn't look back at the empty calabash. Remember that you will not go the way of spinsterhood again. You are led into the room, then covered in white cloth, everywhere on your body except the head. The head is too important. This task is for the most respected elderly matriarch whose home has peace and whose husband praises her. She lays on your head the special white cloth that your husband-to-be has provided, 3 times, with a prayer. In the name of God, be fruitful, find joy, find love, learn munye, stay, wait. Your mother is coming. She has been called in to speak gently with you, a prayer on her breath only if she has a successful marriage. She blesses you. You can walk now. You will be led by these mothers of old, generations of grace, wisdom, and strength. They are the ones who will take you to your husband's home. Your mother stays behind. She has already said goodbye. Please don't cry. It is still her day of joy.
Thank you, Donna. That's amazing. Thanks, Wanjiru. Donna, this water has been following you. You traveled from coast to coast along the theme of water. Can you please tell us what happened in Rwanda?
Hey! Speaking of water.
The sacred waters of Koinange. That's what it's called. In regular English, it's called the powerful ability to squirt. But it's treated as extremely sacred in Rwanda. And when I first got there, unlike the Gambia and Senegal that gave themselves up to me so beautifully, thanks to you, Renee, thanks to you, to Shiko, to Papis in Senegal, thanks to Lukman in the Gambia, Rwanda didn't. It was not interested in Donna initially, and but then I found this chick. I found two women, Sheila and one of them is a radio host that teaches the ancient practices of Rwanda. And so the first time I tried to open my mouth publicly and say, "Oh, do you know anybody who can teach me about the sacred waters of Koinange?" I was met with absolute, like, the shock on their faces. I thought I was going to be stoned. It's not something they talk about publicly, but I found this chick and she taught me about it. The legend is that there was an ancient queen and she was a warm-blooded, I want to use Wanjiru's words, warm-blooded woman. And her husband was a traveling king who was constantly going off to war. So legend has it that on one of these his quests, the queen was lonesome. They said her bed was cold. And so she went outside and called one of the guards and asked him to come and lay with her. And the poor guard, who was trembling and fumbling, went everywhere on the queen but in her. And so as he trembled and shook and rubbed himself on the queen experienced for the first time in her life a gushing stream of waters coming from a secret and sacred place. And she called it the Koinange. And so the myth says that, and there's a river named after this queen, and they say that it's actually the source of all her waters coming from deep inside. And the queen mandated that every woman must know this joy. Every woman, it is the right of every woman to be loved so deeply and so thoroughly and so deliberately that she releases for her partner the sacred waters, right? It's called the woman's secret. It's somewhere deep within her, and only a man who knows what he's doing can get there. Funny, because the guy didn't know what he was doing. But she made him come and repeat the practice and all of that. And then it became an art that had to be learned. And so they say in Rwanda that sexual pleasure is the right of the woman. And is also twofold. The woman has got to prepare herself to receive the treatment from the man, the series of rubbings and massages and yoni massages and thrusts, and they tell the man penetration is nothing. So from when he's a teenager, he's taught discipline and how to absolutely rid himself of the desire to extract his own pleasure and focus on the woman first. But the woman has to prepare herself. And the way she prepares herself is to elongate her labia. And
how does she do that?
Whoa.
You must pull it, though. Efua, you just pull it.
You pull it with herbs and some herbs. They're mashed together. Some herbs, some things that are anti-inflammatory, some things that help the muscles relax. Some just all kinds of things. And the women, so the girl child, from when she hits puberty, is sent to her mother's mother's home where a group of women, a group of girls around her age are gathered together, and every day for a year they are pulling in a room together. And then the man is sent, the boy child from when he's 12 is sent to his father's home, where himself and a group of young men are taught by the uncles and the elderly men how to massage a woman's yoni, how to pleasure her, how to reduce their own desires for pleasure, how to be disciplined, how to be patient. They say if it takes an hour, you must be there and you must get it. Ooh, and it's real quick. If a man is not able to release from the woman her sacred waters, the woman has a right to tell the elderly women in her clan that she is unhappy. And when they call her for the meeting, they will ask her, is he releasing your waters? And if she says no, the women forward march to the men's councils and say, why is your son wicked to our daughter? Like, this is this is wickedness. And then they ask her, do you want to stay? And she has a right to walk away from that marriage, and there will be no shame to the fact that she's divorced. And in fact, the shame is on the man. But if she didn't do her own part, her own responsibility of pulling, then the man would have the right to leave as well. And then there would be shame on the woman. It was very, very, very interesting. But all of that has changed now because of the genocide. So people like Emma, who works on radio, tirelessly trying to preserve the cultures. They are trying to form a new language of being, a new way of existence. There's an abuse of the whole culture around the sacred waters of Kunyaza. And people are still just trying to be happy in Rwanda. So it's a bit different, and now there's COVID, so we'll see. It'll be useful to see what what everything becomes like.
Speaking of COVID, yes. But I think it's interesting, even I'll say before we go on to talk about COVID related issues, because what you see is, even in Nigeria, for example, we see I'm saying this because I'm seeing themes that no matter what, to us, especially as Africans, the rights around sex are quite important because, even in Nigeria, we have the Calabar culture, part of which is actually, there's something called a fattening room, which is essentially where young women are sent to a particular place in that culture.
Yeah.
And they are taught the rights and acts of how to please a man.
Yeah.
That culture, yes, there's a lot around that, and it's about a year, and they teach you everything to do with womanhood. Yeah. In the North, we have certain traditions as well. I mentioned the North because a lot of the things you said, even about the permissibility of sex being something that is a reward once you're married, is something that I've seen being repeated in the North. And the way that the sensibilities of the North in Nigeria are actually quite similar to the sensibilities I've experienced in Senegal. But I think, unless, Wanjiru, if you've got anything else to add to that, I would love for us just to talk a bit more about, the Botswana part of your trip, how COVID affected your observations of both places, ladies. And,
sorry, just before Wanjiru goes into that, I wanted to just say to your point, Efua, that what was refreshing in Rwanda is that unlike every other country, Nigeria inclusive, that I'd been to, where it's the woman being prepared, in Rwanda, it was refreshing to see that the men were also being prepared for the women. So that was refreshing for me. Sorry, Wanjiru, please go ahead.
It's actual feminism. I like that because it's actually what feminism ought to look like. In that both parties are responsible for their sexual pleasure, but also for their partner's sexual pleasure.
Yeah.
And also responsible in the terms of one thing which, and Wanjiru, correct me if I'm wrong as well, but we don't I wonder if we communicate effectively, especially as people our age, in terms of what we want and how we want it. Because both of you guys have spoken about all the countries and said, with the women who were entrenched in this traditionally, all those women, essentially told you at some point that you are responsible for stating explicitly or implicitly what you want out of that sexual encounter.
Yeah.
I think in my experience, the gap is not even about the communication, but just the knowledge of what it is indeed that you want. I was faced with this question when I would be online trying to match with somebody, and I was like, do I tell them that I'm here for research? Do I tell them that I'm here? Like, because you have to be very clear about what you're looking for and what you want and what you're on this space for. And which is the reason why I think I find a lot of comfort in online dating, because everybody knows what you're there to do, right? There is some stigma, but like there's stigma, but there's also millions of people on these platforms. So I think that there's a definite ownership that is lacking in the space, be it in our ownership of the way that we want to be treated in our bodies, and also just how we're trying to find our companionship. Because in fact, I stopped asking people if they were single. I'd ask them if they were monogamous instead. I'm just like, because at some point, all you are meeting is like married people, and I'm just like, this is a signal that something's shifting in the way that these apps are being used. So I'm just like, and I'm not going to assume that because you're on these apps, you're being incestuous or adulterous, not incestuous, adulterous. So my thing was just like, because I don't know what your situation is at home. Are you monogamous? Are you polygamous? But there's just a refusal, or not a refusal, but a lack of desire to get the language and the dance to evolve. You asked about COVID, and COVID was a big reason why I think the Botswana leg of the trip wasn't as full as it could have been. I think COVID hit Nigeria while I was there. A few days before I was due to leave, and I then left Nigeria. And already once the announcement was made, people don't want to be hanging out with people who've been through airports. It's just not a thing that you understandably so. So I think I stopped even trying to set up any meetings once COVID was announced in Lagos, and focused on just exploring your lovely city. And then spent 10 days in Nairobi, and then went to Botswana. And by that time, COVID was a real thing. And Trevor and I would constantly be like, should I go? Should I not? But to be honest, this project was so incredibly managed from a logistics point of view that I, every moment in Botswana, for those, I think what should have been 8 days ended up being about 3, there was consistent check-ins and being like, are you fine? And we'd agree that I was going, knowing that the minute, Siobhan. And I knew that the minute Botswana reported its first case, and that would have repercussions on my ability to enter Kenya and return home, that I would leave, and that's exactly what happened. I think 3 days in, the Maun got hit with COVID, and I left. But before then, there was a lot of like incredible exploration. I met this incredible activist called Kat, who shared time and knowledge and generosity with me about what the decriminalization of same-sex marriage in Botswana has done for the online dating space. She was like, don't waste your time with anything, just go onto Grindr and just play on Grindr and see what's happening there, because it's the most popular platform there. But to be honest, at this point, the energy had shifted, and I'm glad that I got to see 3 days of that incredible city and want to go back. But yeah, it definitely felt that something was shifting, and the place to be while it was shifting was at home, obviously.
It's important.
Yeah, you don't want to be stuck outside the streets in these times.
Yeah, you really don't. So if you guys, do you have any particular things or activities that you either wish you could do again, you could delve deeper into? Do you have any particular areas that you wish you hadn't seen, or that you've taken a key learning from for how you would do it differently? Not in terms of the festival, but in terms of your perception of what to expect before you went, right? So for example, Wanjiru, I know you were quite surprised by how hot it was everywhere.
Oh my God. Yeah, actually I have one major regret, and that is something I'm now calling my Anglophone arrogance. Donna and I talked a lot about learning French before we went to Senegal, and I was like, nah, of course they must speak some English. Like, who doesn't speak English? And let me tell you, they do speak English, but they will not, because you should know better. You should really know better. And I think that it's an arrogance that I found was thrown back in my face, and very deservedly so. I should have spent a bit of time learning like the basics, because that also is not just a question of the problematics of these languages, because my issue was I don't want to learn French before I've learned Wolof, which is fair. But there's a lot more about the respect it shows, or you will show someone when you take the effort to learn, to address them in the way that they are used to being addressed. So the French speaking is something I will pick up some French before I go to Senegal again. And also just invest more time. And I know now what questions to ask. Of course, it was the first time we were doing this. I've said before, I don't think a week was enough, but we just didn't have more time. It wasn't possible. And that's no one's fault. So it's a function of the way that the world works, I believe.
I think for me, I would have added, if I was going to change anything, I would have added Uganda to my travels, because I understood from my conversations in Rwanda, almost everybody was like, "Oh, the Ugandan women are more open. You would have had so much more information about Kunyaza it's called something else there, but something similar anyway." And then if I was going to change anything, I would take more money and shop the life out of Senegal. Yay, Renee! The fashion in Senegal. And Renee hooked me up. So yeah, that's something I would have done differently. Yeah. Yeah.
We try. Well, I think we're running out of time.
We have run out of time.
So maybe we can wrap it up. On behalf of Efua, if I may speak on your behalf, Efua, please.
Of course.
On behalf of Efua and myself, thank you to the lovely Wanjiru Koinange and Donna Obaseki-Ogunnaike, and heartfelt thanks to the audiences. We dearly miss you. This Zoom life is not a good life.
Yeah.
Say that again.
The Edinburgh International Book Festival independent online bookshop is I'm getting this wrong.
Again.
The Edinburgh International Book Festival independent online bookshop is still.
I'm sure David is laughing. I'm sure David is just like, go ahead, try it again.
Okay, wait. shopedbookfest.co.uk. Got it. The Edinburgh International Book Festival independent online bookshop is shop.edbookfest.co.uk, where audiences can buy all relevant event titles and many, many more. Please note that this website may not be live until the beginning of the festival on the 15th of August. Okay, this year's festival program, it's so weird. This year's festival program is free of charge for everyone and has been made possible by the generosity of supporters and donors. If you have enjoyed this event, we'd love you to consider making a donation to the Edinburgh International Book Festival so they can continue their great work of putting on events for as many people as possible. So I think that's us. I think we have many, many more discussions to have.
Yes, we do.
Yes. On the side. But thank you to everybody that joined us. And maybe Donna and Wanjiru and Efua, you want to give people a heads up as to where they can find and follow you and kind of and pick up on the conversations if that is possible at all.
Sure. You can find me on the internet everywhere. I am my name, Wanjiru Koinange, everywhere. And buy my book from the bookstore because it's just brand new and it's fresh and I love it.
And that is, I believe, the Havoc of Choice, correct?
The Havoc of Choice.
There we go.
My name is Donna Obaseki-Ogunnaike, and that's my name on all my social media handles. My debut collection of poems, A Different Kind of Broken, is available and will be available online by the time you're done, hopefully. But follow me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, watch my videos. My poetry heals, I swear. At least a headache. At least it will heal a headache. So follow me and keep up with the conversation and let's talk.
Well,
yeah.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
So mine is Efua Star I have a few projects coming up, which I'm happy to update you, one of which is a podcast that's looking to be called Candid Convos with Efua. I am available on Twitter, but more available on Instagram, also at Efua. That's EFUASTAR. My book, my novel is coming out soon. I will keep you guys updated on that as well.
Awesome.
Cool beans.
Thank you, Renee and Efua, for being wonderful guides and allowing us to see your cities through your incredibly beautiful eyes. Asante sana.
Thank you. And also to Lookman.
Thank you.
And to Lookman. Oh my gosh, Lookman.
Yeah.
Bookman hooked it up. He was a hookup in both Gambia and actually everywhere. He just sorted us out. So mad gratitude to him as well. Okay.
Super. Thank you very much, guys. I think that's us done.